let's first understand what is a Maven plugin. Now, internally, if you invoke Maven, you will be invoking a goal, right? And what happens? The goal will be calling a plugin, and the plugin is the one which will be actually doing a task. So internally, if you see, Maven is actually all about running different kind of plugins, where by default, if you go through the life cycle, you will be calling all the default plugins. So that is when, now if you want Maven to behave anywhere differently other than the default way, then you have to specify a different plugin through which Maven will be accordingly doing a task based on what kind of plugin that you want to do. So that is when, for example, let's say I am doing compile and I'm doing testing. But after doing the testing, I don't want to go directly to the package step. Maybe I want to connect to some database and I want to update some data before I create a package. Now, by default, the Maven's lifecycle doesn't have anything, because after the compile, it will call test, and after the test, it is going to call the package. So that is when, if you want to do anything like this other than the default behavior of lifecycle, then you have to specifically tell by using a plugin corresponding to a task. For example, I wanted to connect to a database, right? So I have to give the details about the database plugin to the Maven so that we can instruct Maven to do something in a different way other than the standard behavior. So like that, Maven is all about plugin management. If any point of time, if you are going to ask Maven or tell the Maven to do a workflow differently, then you have to instruct it by specifying a plugin of our interest where it will be doing an exact task other than the default one. Okay, so that way in Maven, it is all about running different kind of plugins. So if you don't tell anything, it will be using the default goal and the default plugin associated. But if you want to do anything additionally in about it, then you will specify what is that plugin through which you will be doing this additional task. Okay, so that way, once again, Maven is all about plugin management. So if you look, there are basically two types of plugins in Maven. So what are the two types of plugin? So the plugin can basically be classified into build plugin and reporting plugin. So a build plugin are nothing but a set of plugins using which you will be doing a build activity. So all the default phases of the Maven's lifecycle will internally call a plugin, right? So everything is going to be a part of plugin. Pretty much when you're working on Maven, more than 95%, all the plugins, whatever that you're going to use, will be of the type build plugin only. So the compile step, test step, or the package, install, deploy, clean, everything is going to be a part of build plugin only. Okay. The only difference is any plugin that you're using to generate a report or create a report in terms of some documentation for your project, then those are considered as the other type, that is reporting plugin. So the last goal that you have, that is site, that is referred as the reporting plugin. But pretty much other than that, any kind of plugin that usually you will be using will be of the type build plugin only. So the default lifecycle of Maven, whatever we are going to use, is also going to be a part of build plugins only. So that is how, when we want Maven to do something, you have to specify what is the plugin, and based on the type of the plugin, there is a specific syntax that you will be using through which we will be telling to the Maven on what plugin to use and associated to it what exactly that you want to work on. Okay, so that is how you will tell to the Maven by specifying the details of the plugin in the pom.xml, and based on that, you will be invoking a goal. So when you invoke a goal, Maven will automatically try to call that plugin that you have specified, and based on that, whatever task it has to do, it will be performing. Okay, so that way, now let us try to understand in this session how is that we are going to add a new plugin to the Maven project or specify a different workflow for the Maven rather than working on the standard behavior of doing a compile, test, and package or install. So if you want to change anywhere in between, how is that you can do? And for that, what and all plugins we have, we'll be going through it. So before we step in once again, there is a syntax which we have to follow, because when you use a pom.xml, there is a proper way that you have to specify with the tags. Okay, now to understand it, first let's understand how is that you are going to specify the values into a pom.xml. So if you take a pom.xml, you will always have a tag called project and you will close it with project. So this is how your pom.xml will look, and in that you will be basically giving the group ID, correct, and then some value for that, and then you will be giving the artifact ID and then a particular value for it, and then you will specify a version, something like this. So this is the bare minimum thing that we saw. So now if you want Maven to behave in a way different, then you have to add a specific plugin to it, and based on that Maven will be behaving in a different way. So the first thing that you have to specify is what is the type of plugin that you're going to use. So that way, as I said, by default majority of the plugins what we are going to use is of the type build plugin only. So the syntax what we will be using is, now under the project tag you will create a tag called build, and all the plugins that you are going to use will be specified inside it. For a minute, focus on this. So any plugin that is going to be additional other than the default behavior, if you want to specify, you will be specifying it inside the build tag, which will be under project. You cannot give the build tag outside the project. It has to be within the project. Okay. Now, under the build, what is that you're going to specify? You are going to specify a particular plugin. So that way, now you will give a tag called plugin and close it. Any detail about a particular plugin will be given inside this. Now, in a project, you can specify more than one different plugin that you want to use so that Maven will work differently. So that way, each plugin that you want to use, let me say this is plugin 1, and you want to use one more plugin, then you can specify it once again in the same way like this. So for each plugin that you want to work, you can keep adding a tag called plugin and close it, and between it, whatever value that you want to give, you will be giving. And now as many plugins as you want, you can add it to this particular project, but everything should be under the build tag. But now, since we can have more than one plugin defined in your project, you will not be directly using it, but you will be grouping together this plugin by one more tag called plugins. So basically, it will be inside a tag called plugins, and under that, all the plugin will be put. That is the reason, because we are trying to group different plugins. So first you will create a tag called build, and under that you will be specifying plugins, and in the plugins what we are going to do, we are going to specify each value about what that plugin is and how to use. Okay, first thing, you understand this structure. So build tag, and under that plugins, and under that for each plugin you will create one tag and give the value. So let me just remove it to keep it simple. So you have a build tag, a plugins under it, and under it plugin. So wherever you see a tag name ending with S, that means you will be having more than one occurrence of the same thing. If needed, you can add. That's what it means. So build plugins and under this plugin. Now, when you are defining a plugin, what and all values that you have to give. So the first thing that you have to use for a plugin is you need to tell what is the plugin. Okay, and then after that you will tell when to use the plugin, and finally you will say what exactly the plugin has to do. Getting it? So if you are trying to define a plugin, then basically we need to tell to the Maven's project on what exactly is the plugin that we are trying to use or asking the Maven to use, and when exactly you want to use, and then by using it, what is that exact task that you want to do. Okay, so all these three details has to be given for each of the plugin that you're going to define. So the first thing, how will you define what is a plugin? So as we know so far, you are going to identify a plugin or a project in Maven using the GAV only, right? So that way, for every plugin, you will be having a specific GAV. Okay, so that way, for whatever plugin that you are using, once again, there will be a specific GAV of it, which we need to find out and give. So now let's say you are going to have something like this similar. So for defining the GAV of a plugin, you will specify what exactly is the GAV based on what plugin you are using. So you will be having some values like this. Okay, corresponding to each one of them you will be giving. So that is how when you run Maven, it will be knowing what plugin that it has to use. Okay, so this is the first point where we will be telling what is the plugin that we are going to use. Then once you have specified using the GAV on what is the plugin, the next thing that we have to tell is when to use the plugin. Okay, now to specify this and also to specify both of them, you will actually use a tag called execution. Don't get confused. Now, as of now, try to only understand the syntax, and as we keep working, you will get used to it. But majorly focus on the order that I'm trying to write and what is the syntax that I'm going to use. Whereas the syntax will be the same and the values will differ from plugin to plugin, and with respect to what kind of project you are working, the values will different, but the structure is going to be the same. So that now under a plugin, we can give both the steps on when it has to be executed and what exactly it has to do under one tag called executions. And now, if you see here, I'm actually writing a executions. I'm ending it with S. That means now for a plugin, you can have more than one type of execution. So that is why for each execution that you are going to use for a plugin, you will specify it using a tag further called execution. So what is the need of this? So if you try to look, using a plugin, you are supposed to do some task, right? Now let's say I was giving the same example of connecting to a database. Now if you want, using the same plugin, you can connect to a database, or you can run a database, or you can start a database, or simply take another example where you are trying to use a plugin to connect to a web server like Apache. Now, using the same plugin, if I want, I can execute the plugin to start Apache, or using the same plugin, I can execute one step which will try to stop the Apache, or using the same plugin, I can write a execution, or I can do a execution step which will try to deploy some file or artifact into it. So like that, we can do different kind of executions for a single plugin. So depending on what exactly you want to do, you can have more than one executions. So that is why the structure that you are going to specify will be executions, and under that execution. And for each execution, you are going to tell both the types or both the values on when this execution has to be done, and when you run that, what exactly you have to do. Okay, so that way, now under the executions, we are going to specify these two values. Okay, so how do you specify when to call? So when I say when to call the plugin, what exactly you're going to do by using Maven? Basically, you are going to go through some lifecycle phases, correct? So that is how when you want to invoke a plugin, basically you will be attaching this plugin to any particular phase of the Maven. So if I wanted to call this plugin exactly after the test phase, then I can attach this plugin to the test phase by giving a tag called phase. So let's say I say like this. So what does this mean is, when you are running this project and whenever the project or Maven is going to call this test phase, that is, if you have given some goal and as part of that, when Maven is going to run the test phase, after completing the test phase, by default, what is it going to do? By default, after completing the test phase, it will call package step, correct? Or it will call the package phase. But now, since you have attached this phase to this plugin, after calling the test phase, it is going to call this plugin, and whatever that you have specified further, based on that, it is going to execute it. Okay, so that is how now you are changing the default behavior of Maven, where after you complete the test, instead of calling the package, Maven will call this plugin, and based on what you have specified to do, it is going to call this plugin and do some task, and then if you want to proceed, it will proceed further. So that is how you are going to change the behavior of Maven by adding a new plugin and attaching it to a phase. Instead of this, suppose if I say compile, then whenever the Maven is going to run the compile phase, after completing the compile phase, it will basically call this plugin to which it is associated, and while calling it, whatever the further steps that you have given, it will be running them. Okay, so remember, like this, you are going to attach or specify a phase where whenever you are calling this particular phase, after the completion of this phase, this particular plugin will be automatically invoked by Maven. So that is how one way we are going to call a plugin, by attaching it to a particular phase. Okay, then so we have given what is the plugin by using the GAV, and then we are going to specify when to use by giving a tag called execution, and inside the execution, under a tag called phase, we are going to tell when exactly it has to be called. Now, to specify the step on what exactly it has to do. So now when you say Maven compile, after it has completed compile, it will call this plugin and it has to do something, right? So what is that you have to do? That particular details will be further specified under one more tag called configuration. Okay, so whatever that it has to do, you will specify it here. So anything that Maven has to do specifically by calling this plugin, you will be giving it here. So now whenever you do compile, after completing the compile phase, it will call this plugin, and when it is calling the plugin, based on whatever that you have given, it will be invoking it. Okay, so now this is how you will be defining a plugin. So this structure is going to be remaining the same for no matter what kind of plugin that you are calling, where every time you define a plugin, you need to give three things. That is, what exactly is the GAV? That's what I'm trying to tell. So when you're giving the details about a plugin, you are supposed to give three details. That is, what is that plugin that you want the Maven to call? Okay, so that way you will specify what is that plugin using the GAV. Then when you say use this plugin, when is it supposed to use? Correct? So you are trying to tell to Maven to use this plugin, but you should tell along with it on when to use the plugin. So that is when, using this tag called phase, we will be giving a phase of the Maven's lifecycle, where whenever Maven calls this phase, after completing this phase, it will be automatically calling this plugin. So that is how we are attaching this plugin to this particular phase, so that after Maven runs this step, it will automatically call this plugin. So that is the second specification, where we will be telling when to use the plugin. Okay, so we have specified what is the plugin here and when to use the plugin using this, and then finally what exactly the plugin has to do when it has been called at this location. That detail you will be giving it under the configuration tag. Getting it on the syntax on what you will be using first? So every time you want to use a new plugin, think about giving three values. That is, what is the plugin, when to call the plugin, and what exactly the plugin has to do when it has been called. Okay, and the syntax for that will be like this. Getting it? Is it clear, first of all, on the structure before we get into an example? Yeah, Kavya. So now, did you understand yesterday's lifecycle phase, where if I call Maven as, let's say, Maven package, what it is going to do? So it is always going to come through certain standard default structure like this. So if not, please try to go through yesterday's session, where these are the default lifecycle phases which Maven will be going through. So if you call anything here, it will always be coming from the beginning and it will always go through only this. So this is what Maven by default understands. It doesn't know anything else. So now if you want Maven to do something in addition to this, then you have to tell what is the plugin that it has to call, and for that, when it has to call. So now if you want a new plugin to be calling in between this or in between this, then you will attach the Maven as a phase based on where you want to call. So now if I say phase as compile, after completing the compile, whatever the plugin that you are additionally given, that will be called. Before it goes to the next step, it will basically call it. That is why we use phase. So if I say phase as package, whenever you run Maven package, after completing the package step, it is going to automatically call the plugin in which you have given the phase as package. Yeah, it is not before. Suppose if you want to call before this, then pretty much give the phase attached to it. Okay, so if you give a phase, Maven will always execute the plugin after completing the phase. Okay, I'll talk about next scenario on how is that you have to call a plugin in a way what you asked, Vinay. But for now, try to understand, if I give a plugin and I give a phase to it, every time only after calling or completing that phase, Maven will be invoking a plugin. Okay. Now, to this, so there is one more thing that you need to understand is, along with this, now, if you recall, what is that we were doing? We were saying Maven and some goal, right? Where this goal will be calling a default plugin, and then that is going to do some task. Quickly, if you want to see that, if I say Maven clean, what is this? This is the phase of Maven, but internally it is also going to act as a goal. That is why corresponding to this goal, there is a default plugin associated and it is trying to call. Okay. Now, in the same way, if you are trying to call this plugin, by default, the Maven will not know what is that plugin. So if you want to refer to a plugin, you should always refer to the goal associated to that plugin. So that is how, when you say to Maven that you have to invoke a plugin, you will not ask it to directly invoke the plugin. You will specify what is the goal associated to it, and with respect to that, it will be calling it. So that way, now for this particular plugin to do this particular task or a particular execution, you will specify a goal where you can specify more than one goal. So that is why you can specify it under a tag called goals. And in this, you will be giving what is the name of the goal associated to it. Now, for example, I can give any string inside it. So what exactly happens here is, you are trying to create a plugin definition. In that, you are saying whenever you call compile, okay, now this is my goal. I'm saying Maven compile. So for the Maven compile, there is a default compile plugin that it will use, correct? So that is the step that we know so far what it does. But now, since you have attached a plugin with this compile, what compile will do is, compile will first invoke the goal which is associated to that plugin. So that way, this, after completing, it will invoke this goal called run. And this run will now know that there is a particular plugin associated, and it will call this particular plugin that we have defined. Okay, so that is how what Maven is going to do is, it is not going to actually call the plugin directly, but it is going to basically invoke a goal associated, and with respect to that, it is going to call the plugin. So you will invoke the goal or the phase and that plugin, and after completing it, it will call this goal, and only through this goal, this plugin will be invoked. Okay, so that is how by default you will be following this standard as the format. Now, this is the format. No matter what plugin that you're going to use, you will always be specifying. Okay, so try to remember this. As we go with couple of examples, I'll be showing you the same format what we are going to use. So is it clear on the first level what exactly is the plugin that you're going to give, and what is the syntax for which you're going to give a plugin? So if you're defining a plugin, first thing you need to do is give the tag called build, and under that you will be giving all the details, and inside that plugins, and then plugin, where under each plugin you will be giving the details of your interested plugin. And then you will first tell what is the plugin using the GAV, and then you will have the execution tag and then execution, and under that, using the phase and the goal, you will be telling when exactly to use the plugin. So that is how whenever you call this phase of the Maven's project, after completing it, this will call this goal, and since this goal is associated with this plugin, it will invoke this plugin. And what it has to do when it is invoking this plugin, that we will specify it in the configuration tag. So The syntax is going to remain the same no matter what kind of plugin you are using, but the values will be changing based on what is the plugin used and why you are going to use it. Okay, so those values will be changing. Is it clear? Vinay, Nagesh, Kavya, Hari. Are you getting it? What is the syntax? Okay. So now let's try to see what and all are the plugins that we have in Maven that we can make use of. So to know that, pretty much if you go to the Maven site once again, okay, so you can go to the Maven site and here it will give you a list of plugins that is available. So in this, you can see that there are tons of plugins that are available based on what exactly you are going to use it for. They have segregated where you can see now these are nothing but the phases which we have used as the default Maven's lifecycle, and internally each one of them is a plugin. Okay, so like this you have many plugins that you can use it for creating different kind of packages. If you want to create different logs or you want to report it differently, then you can use this plugins. Suppose if you want to connect to different tools using Maven, then for each one of them you have a specific plugin. So like this, whatever plugin that you want to work on, you can choose it, and based on that you will be specifying all the details. Okay, so the first thing what we will do is, let us take one example where I am going to use a plugin called tern. So if you come here, there is a plugin called tern. Okay, what is the purpose of this? So before Maven came into the market, there was a tool called Ant. That was the one which was pretty much used for Java projects to build. But the problem was you need to do so much of manual task, and there was a lot of effort in maintenance where you have to define each and everything, not like Maven where if you just follow the standard structure and the life cycle, Maven was automatically able to detect everything and take care of your project. So that is the advantage where whatever projects that was written in Ant, they started migrating it to Maven. But when you try to migrate, there will be a lot of efforts where you would have already defined some kind of structure in the previous build tool. Now changing it will be a difficulty. So that is when one thing that we can do when you are trying to migrate a project from Ant to Maven, rather than changing everything, you can simply do one thing, that is, you can create the project in the structure of Maven and use the POM, but from the Maven, you can invoke Ant so that you will have the directory structure and the advantages of Maven, as well as Maven will call the Ant and it will try to run a specific build script that you have written in the Ant previously, so that you don't have to worry about modifying anything. So that way, you will be easily able to migrate a project which is available in Ant to Maven. So the requirement what I have now is, from Maven, I want to call a Ant script. Getting it? So I have to run Maven for my project where internally Maven should be calling a Ant file or a particular Ant task. So simply the requirement is Maven should be calling Ant and do something else. So that way, what is that we have to do? So now we know that if you want to do anything additionally other than the default lifecycle, that is compile, test, package, install, or deploy, or clean, now you have to specify what is the plugin that you want to use, when to use, and what it has to do. Okay, so that way now I'm going to use a plugin called ant run plugin through which we will give some simple ant commands and see how Maven is going to use this plugin and execute those ant tasks. Okay, so now coming to this, if you are going to use a plugin, I know that I have to use the syntax. So for this syntax, I need the value first on what is the GAV of the plugin. So if you want to find out the GAV of the plugin, first go to the home page of the plugin. So on that plugin, if you basically click, you will be getting this page, and this page is called as home page for that plugin. So currently we are trying to see how to use a plugin called ant run in our project through which we can invoke some ant command. Okay, so the first thing what you do is when you go inside your Maven's project, that is your plugin specific homepage, then if you come down, you can see that you have a option called usage page. Okay, click on that. So if you click on it, you will be getting an example on how to use this plugin. Okay, so if you see this, you can see it is giving you an example. Along with that, it is giving the same structure as what we were explaining or what we just now saw. So if you want to use this plugin called Maven ant run plugin, then this is the way that you should put it inside your pom.xml, where you will first have the project folder, and under that you can have some details like GAV, and then you're going to use the build tag, under that plugins, and under that in one plugin you are going to define what is the plugin. So first you will give the GAV of the plugin, so you can just simply copy paste it, and then you'll give the executions, and in that you are going to specify the phase associated to it, so that whenever you call this lifecycle phase, Maven will invoke this plugin. And then coming to the configuration, this is the value which will be changing based on each plugin. Now, this plugin is used to run a task called ant, or basically it is used to run a ant command. So in that way, the value of the configuration that you're going to use will be specific to ant. So just try to understand this. If you're trying to call ant, there is a specific syntax for it. So now based on that, we will be trying to give those value. So again, you don't have to know completely how ant works, but I'm just trying to give you an example first. Basically, if you want to invoke a ant related task or a ant command, you will be using this way. So that way, now the configuration, whatever value that you're going to use, have to give that ant command. So this is the structure that we are going to use. Now, I've already written it. So let me just copy paste and we'll try to understand this. So let us go to our project. So this is our project and the pom.xml, right? So anywhere inside your project tag, we will try to add a plugin. So here I will paste it. So now just have a look. What is that I've done? Inside your project tag for the pom.xml, I have added this details. And what exactly it is? First, I am following the structure of giving the build, and inside this plugins, and in that one plugin, and first thing that I have to give is what is the plugin, right? So I am going to give the GAV, which I have already copied from that home page. So if you know, you can directly run or call it. If not, you can just copy paste it from the home page of that plugin and put it up here. So that way, this is the GAV of the plugin. Okay, the next thing, executions. So execution means you can call this plugins in different ways based on what you want to do. So that is why I can give execution, and each task that it has to do has to be specified under a execution. Okay, and then ID. Now ID is nothing but identification for your Maven project. Because when you are actually going into production, there might be 10 to 20 plugins like this that you will be putting everywhere, and it will not be easy for you to identify. That is why ID will be just a name using which you can easily identify when Maven is running what exactly it is calling. So it is just a identification way. But other than that, if you look, we are going to specify the phase where whenever I run this project, and if I run clean, only then it is going to get invoked. And for that, I have to attach or associate a goal. So when I say run, what it means is after completing the clean phase, or whenever you invoke clean for this Maven project, it is going to call this run goal. And with respect to this, it is going to call this plugin. And in that, what exactly it is going to do, it is what we have given in the configuration. So now what I want is when I call this plugin, I want to run a ant task. Okay, so there is a task called echo. Echo means just like how I am trying to put a echo. What will happen if I say echo something? It is just going to print, right? So that is what I'm trying to do. So the syntax for ant is this way. So you will give the command that you want to call and what is that value that you want to put. Now, let's say I'll put it up simply. I'll just say, so what I'm trying to do here is I am trying to run these three command and it will be printing on the screen so that whenever we run the ant phase called clean, it will internally call this and it will try to execute this plugin. In that, it is going to call this three steps. Okay, so now you see when I called clean before, it did only this, but now when I call Maven clean, watch what it does. First, it is going to, didn't we save this? Okay. Huh? What's happening? Oh my goodness, I've done something wrong. This is not the actual project. What I'm looking at is a different folder, and this is a Git example that I was giving you, right? So I am trying to put in it. So let's go to the proper Maven project. Okay. So I was in a different structure. So this is the actual project. This is the pom.xml for this project. So let me open this. So this is the actual one. Let me close this. So this is the actual project. And for this, now I'm trying to give the plugin by putting in the structure. Okay, so this is for the demo project. In the pom.xml of the demo project, I'm adding this. And corresponding to it, now if you see, so far, it was not trying to call anything else because there was nothing else. But now we have added a plugin and attached the plugin to this phase called clean. So now when you run clean, it is going to invoke this plugin and additionally, it will execute these tasks. Okay, so now after completing this, if you can see, it is calling this plugin which we have defined, and in that it is trying to execute the task specific to it. So like this, now if you attach this plugin to any phase, whenever you are calling that phase, it will always run that. Okay, so if I say Maven compile, it is going to exactly complete the compile first, and after completing, it is going to call the plugin, and based on it, whatever you have given, it will invoke. Now, if I say Maven clean, will it invoke? No, because this plugin is associated only to the compile phase. That is why only when you call compile, it will internally, after completing the compile, it will be invoking this plugin. So if you call any other phase, it will not be calling it. So now if I say Maven compile, only then it will be trying to call this plugin. So specific to a phase where you have associated a plugin, only then this plugin will be called. If not, it will not be called. Getting it? On how is that you will specify a plugin and how will you call it? Hello? Are you guys getting it? Here, it is giving you a success. That means nothing went wrong. Suppose if there was any error, it will give you the error message and it will say it is failure. For example, now let me just do a syntax error here. Okay. Actually, there was supposed to be a phase with the angular bracket closing, but I am trying to give a syntax error. Let's run this. And it is going to give you an error where it is saying that the build is not success because there is an error that is happening at a particular line, and it clearly tells you that at this line, at this column, something is error. Try to fix it. So that is how, if there is a problem in the execution, then it will show. Or suppose when you are trying to run a command and there is a problem that it is facing, it will also show exactly at that step wherever the problem is happening. So if there is no problem, then pretty much it is going to give you a success when it is able to run all the steps without any problem. So that's how you will know that everything ran properly and there are no problems in it. This is the page where you will see all the list of plugins available for Maven. So go to the Maven site, and in this, if you go to the Maven plugins, you will be seeing all the other plugins. Now, before getting into the other plugins, first of all, did you guys understand how to invoke a plugin and how exactly it is getting called? So now if you see, only if I call compile, it is going to be invoking this. So if I call clean, it is not going to call because this plugin is associated only to the compile phase. Getting it? Is that clear? Okay. Now, this is a question where, so if I gave Maven clean, it was not calling this, right? What will happen if I say Maven test? Will this get called? Okay, anyone else? Now, when I say Maven test, is it going to call this plugin or not? Okay. Why do you say it is no? Okay. So you're saying phase is different. That is absolutely correct. But Let us go back and understand the Maven's life cycle. So when I say Maven test, what exactly it will do? Can someone say? Forget about the plugin, but what exactly Maven will do when you say Maven test? So when I say test, what is Maven going to do now? Exactly, it will follow the sequence, right? So in that way, when you are calling test, what is it going to do first? It is going to internally call compile, isn't it? So even though you are not explicitly invoking, Maven is going to call as part of the default lifecycle. So that is when test is actually going to call compile. So now, whether you are invoking it or not, that is what the point I said. Whenever Maven is going to execute that task, not about calling, whenever Maven is going to execute this task, it is going to call. So now, if test has been invoked internally as part of the lifecycle, Maven is going to call the compile phase first, and as part of that, it is going to basically call compile. And in the compile, now I know that I have attached a particular plugin. So the plugin will get executed. Okay, so now if you can look up, what did I say? So first thing is when you call that phase, Maven is going to work on its behavior. What is its behavior? For the test, it is going to call the compile phase first. But as part of the compile phase, we have given a plugin. So it is going to first execute the plugin. And after completing the plugin, it is going to come to the test phase and do whatever is the standard behavior. So that is how it is not what we are invoking, but when the Maven is calling that particular phase. So based on that, it is going to invoke it. Getting the difference? So whenever that particular phase to which Maven is attached, I mean the plugin is attached, whenever Maven is going to call, it is going to invoke that plugin. Okay, so now if I say Maven package, will it call the plugin? Yes, that is because package is once again going to call compile. That is why it is going to call. Okay, but if the question comes now, why didn't, if I say Maven clean, it is calling this plugin? Can someone explain me this at least now, if you have really understood the life cycle of Maven? So when I'm saying Maven clean, why is it not calling the plugin?
Adam, because the clean is not a part of the sequence.
Yes, so there are two things. The first thing is, have you specified the plugin, whatever that you have given as part of this goal? No. So first thing is, it is not part of this, so it is not going to call. And the second thing is, this goal is not part of the default lifecycle. That is why when you say clean, it is not going to call anything else, because of which it is not going to call the compile phase, and hence the plugin is not going to be called. So that is how only when Maven is going to invoke that phase based on its life cycle, it is going to call a plugin associated. So remember, it is not about what we are calling. Even though we have specified the plugin, it is going to follow the life cycle, and based on that itself, it will be invoking. Okay, clear so far? I'll come to that, Vinay. I'll explain one by one. Don't be in a hurry. Okay. So first, let us understand one plugin completely, and then I'll obviously talk about few more things. No problem. Okay. Now, since you're curious, so go to this particular plugin page and you will see all the plugins that is available. And in that, if you go to the home page of the plugin, you will see all the examples that you have, different kind of syntax that you can call. So suppose now, instead of calling a task called echo, if you want to directly call a ant file, because even ant is a build tool, and for ant also you will have to specify a configuration file. So that is how what you can do is you can pretty much use this to give different kind of values that you want. So that specifically based on what kind of target that you're going to use. So in ant, you will be specifying everything in terms of in terms of target. So just like how we have the project and inside that you are specifying build, in ant, we will be calling it as a target, and under the tag called target, you will be giving some task on whether it has to compile, whether it has to do the clean, or it has to do the test. So all those things it will be done. So if you are interested to call a ant, and in that ant file, if you are interested to call a particular target, then you will be giving the tag name called target, and under it a particular value. An example for this, now you will be simply saying target, and under the target, whatever the name of the target it has to call. So let's say I had a target by the name compile itself. So it is going to call a target called compile, which is available in the ants build configuration file. Okay, so that is how, what is that specifically that you want to call? You need to give the syntax exactly in terms of ant. So how to use this? You have all those examples here, but this is just an example what I'm trying to give you. But let's take another example where we will be seeing how to use a plugin in a different way. Now, it is not just one plugin that we'll be seeing. We'll be seeing a couple of other plugins also, but we will be seeing it in different phases on how to use. But try to understand how you have to use and when you have to use it, the most important thing based on the syntax. So the first example that what I just showed you is how is that you have to invoke a ant task if you have. But again, the syntax is going to be the same, but the value that you are going to give inside the configuration will be specific based on what you want to call. Or simply if you want to just call another ant file, then give the name of the target inside the tag name called target, and it will invoke it directly. Now, let me take one more example. And in this example, I am trying to use another plugin called EXEC Maven plugin. Okay. Now, you can just type Maven EXE plugin. And just like all the other plugin, you are going to get a home page for this plugin. Why did I choose this plugin specifically? Now, when you do a build of a Maven project, you are going to basically run compile and then test and then do a package and then install or deploy. What if you want to run some external script, any kind of script that you want to call? Like you want to call a shell script, or you want to call a Perl script, or you want to call a Python script, or pretty much any other command that is an operating system command that you want to call. Then what is the option to run? So that is how there is a plugin called EXEC plugin, by which you can run any command or a script which you are going to run from the command prompt. So whatever that you want to run, like this, anything that I'm typing, right? So whatever that I'm trying to run, everything is a command, right? Where I can call a particular command or a script. So just like how you are going to run something from the command prompt, if you want to run the same thing inside the Maven, where it could directly call a operating system command, or it could directly call a script or connect to some other tool. Whatever that you want, you can automate it. But in order to run everything in the same way how you would have called it manually from the operating system, you will use this plugin to run it. So that is why Maven exec plugin is used to run any kind of operating system command or a operating system script that you want to call as if you have invoked directly. So now you can use that script to connect to a database, or you can use the script to connect to a web server, or you can use that script to delete a file, or whatever that is of your interest, you can do. So that is how, if you have a interest of doing something specifically in terms of a command or in terms of calling a script, then you will be using this plugin. Okay. Now, to understand this, once again, you need to know the GAV of this plugin, right? So the first thing what you can do is go to the usage page of this. And if you go, once again, you are going to have the sample configuration from which you can get the GAV. And once again, it is going to have the execution and all those things will be the same, but the configuration value will be different. The previous example, what I was talking about is Ant plugin, where for Ant plugin, you are going to specify what task you want to do. But in this plugin, for the exec, you are actually trying to run a operating system command or a script as we have doing it manually. So that way, the options or the values that you will be giving for the configuration for this plugin is, first, you will tell what is that command or a script which you are trying to run. So basically, from the operating system, that will be called as an executable. Executable is nothing but a file or a program which you can run and get some output. So that way, what is that you want to run? So that you will be giving it under executable. And if you are interested to run that executable or a command or a script from a specific directory other than the directory from where you are invoking, because if you are running Maven, whatever Maven is going to run, it will be running everything from this directory. Suppose if you are interested to run something in a different directory, then you will be specifying it under this value. Okay. And then if you have to pass any value to this, then you will be using one more tag called arguments, and you will be specifying the value for that. Now, let me take the same example where I am trying to run this command called git -version. So that is just a command. Now, if I want to run the same thing inside Maven, what is that I have to do? So first thing is, this is an operating system command. So now I have to use the Maven exec plugin and give the GAV of this plugin. And in that, I have to give the configuration where we will tell what exactly you have to do when you call this plugin. Okay, so let us go back to the pom.xml. Now we are actually trying to add one more plugin to the project. So I don't have to write once again all those things. The only thing is I have to define the plugin. I don't have to write a build tag once again, only the plugin and inside that the new value. So let me take this, and here after this or before this I can give. But now remember, whatever value that you have to give within the plugins. You cannot give above the plugin, because once again it is a syntax what we are going to follow. Okay. So now you can see I have plugins, and inside the plugins I'm basically trying to define two plugins where each plugin is defined under the plugin tag. So there is one plugin and there is another plugin that I have defined now. Okay, so this is what I have done. So let's try to understand what is that I have given. So any details about this plugin I will give within this plugin tag. Okay, And in that, now, first thing, what is that you have to specify? What is the GAV of the plugin? So I have copy pasted it. So this is the GAV of the plugin using which Maven will know that you have to call a plugin called exec Maven plugin. Okay, fine. The next thing I have given is configuration. Now, what is the configuration need? Configuration will specify what exactly the plugin has to do, correct? So that way I'm giving here the executable that I want to call is git. It is just like calling this manually. I'm trying to use the same to put it under the plugin. So the name of the executable which I want to call is git. Suppose if you are trying to call a Perl script or a shell script, then the executable what you will be giving here is the Perl or the shell script name. And if it is going to take any value, that values is what you are going to pass it using the argument tag. So I am going to pass only one value for this. So I am creating arguments, and under argument, you are going to give one value. Suppose if you are passing one more value for this, which is separated by space, then you will add another argument and you can specify this over here. Okay, so like this, each value that you want to pass to it, you can use. Now, if I want to give config -list, it is going to give me this value. So now, if I want to run this command, for example, then here I will say config, and in this I will say -list. Okay, so like this, each value that you want to pass as a parameter, you will be using this. Getting it? Based on what command you are running and how many parameters that you're going to pass, you're just going to keep on adding more and more arguments, which will be passing it as a separate value. Okay, now to just keep the output minimal so that we can actually see, I'll keep it as only version. Okay, so this is what I have to do. Now, if you look very closely, I have actually completed the plugin definition at all, correct? So is there any problem in this plugin, first of all? Where what and all I have given for this plugin? I have given what is the plugin, and then I have given what the plugin has to do, correct? So what else is missing in this definition for a plugin? You can refer this. If you are defining a plugin.
Adam, we haven't mentioned that when to use it.
Exactly. So if you look at this plugin or the plugin definition, I have given only the details about what is the plugin and what to do using this. But I have not told when to use the plugin. So if I want to use this plugin, once again, let's say I want to attach this plugin as part of a clean phase or a package phase, then what is that I will do? Once again, I will create this execution and I will create a phase and I will put it here. So if I exactly put it that way, what will happen? Whenever I call the package phase, this plugin will get invoked. So that is what we know. But there is one more scenario where, let's say you want to call a plugin, but you don't want to call a plugin attached to any of the phase. There could be some requirement like that also, right? Because what is happening, you take this example. Every time you want to call this task, you are unnecessarily calling this compile phase where it is trying to do the compile and then run this and task. So that is how, if you have a requirement where you want to call the plugin directly, then you should not be attaching it to a phase. As simple as that. But instead of attaching it, how is that I can call a plugin? Because in the last example, what we saw is only if you attach a plugin to a phase, every time you call this phase, Maven was calling whatever plugin that we have associated, right? But now let us see the same way of working with a different example in which what we are trying to do is we are not trying to attach this plugin to any of the phase. So the only thing I have given to the plugin definition in the Maven project is what is the GAV, and if you call this, what exactly it has to do. So only those two information I have given. Now, how is that I am going to invoke this plugin? So to understand this, now if you have to call this plugin, how did it call? Basically, you will have to call this phase, attach it to it, and that will call a goal that is attached to it. Only then you are trying to call it, right? In that way, if you really look, every plugin has one goal associated. That is how, even when we are trying to call the default phase, it knew what is the plugin associated. So that way, every plugin that you see in Maven has a goal associated. So that is how you can directly call the goal through which Maven will know that, okay, there is a plugin that you are trying to ask me to run. And if you have specified the details about that plugin, then it will read it based on your project and it will invoke only that and it will not do anything. So that way, for this plugin, what are the goals that is available? So to know that, once again, go back to the home page of that plugin. Okay, so this is the home page of the plugin where the first thing that you see is the goal. So if you want to invoke this plugin directly, then basically there are two goals associated. And when you call this, it is going to directly call this plugin and it will not do anything else in the Maven project. Not only this, all the plugins will have a goal. If you want to see, the previous task or the plugin that we used was tern, and even for that there was a goal. So now if you directly say Maven and this goal, it will directly try to call the tern plugin if you have defined in your project. So that is how, whether you have associated anything with it or not, you will directly call the plugin. Okay, so that way now in our Maven project, if I call this exec as the goal name, then it will directly invoke the plugin which is given in my project. Okay, so now see what happens here. So if you see, if I call this goal, based on this goal, there is a plugin associated. So Maven will first see whether you have defined that plugin in your project. And you can see we have defined that here. It is the same name of the plugin. So it is trying to use this plugin, and in that we have given a task to call this command. So it is trying to call this command. Same thing. Now just an example, if I change this to config, and list. So it is going to execute only this plugin, and associated to it, whatever the task or the command that you have given, it will run it. Okay, so this is how the other way of calling a plugin is directly calling the plugin through the goal associated, that we can get it from the home page of it. So you have both the ways of calling, where if you want a plugin to be attached to a particular phase, so that every time when you call that particular phase, it will always invoke the plugin associated to it after completing the phase. The same thing, if you have a necessity to call a plugin without attaching it to any phase, then you can call it by directly giving the name of the goal. So now I can call both of them together where first goal is this and the second goal is compile. So what is going to do? Once again, it is going to work on the standard workflow where what is that it is going to do if you give two goals. First, it will execute in the same order where based on this goal, whatever that a plugin is associated, it is going to call. And after completing it, you are going to basically call this goal where this is part of the default lifecycle. So it is going to start with resource generation and then compile. But we have also added one more plugin to this. So after completing this, it is going to basically invoke the plugin. Getting it? How you want to call a plugin before a plugin, Vinay, that you are asking, as well as different ways of calling a plugin. So like this, you can add as many plugins that you want to your project where you can try to call a plugin directly, or you can attach a plugin based on another phase so that after completing the phase, it will be trying to call only that. So whatever now you do, you have to keep in mind it will always go with its standard behavior where in addition to the standard behavior, you are asking it to do something more or additional to it. So that is what you are going to specify using the plugin. Getting it? Any questions? Vinay, Nagesh, Kavya, Hari. Okay, so I'll stop it here. Now, as I said, I'll be showing you a couple of more plugins, but not exactly in this, but I will try to show it with a different scenario where you will be using a plugin. But whenever I say plugin, the concept is going to be the same where you have to use a structure where you have to start with the build tag, and in the build tag you are going to give plugins where more than one plugins if you have, you are going to specify inside it, and then for each plugin definition you are going to put it under the plugin tag where by standard you will be specifying what is the plugin using the GAV and when to use the plugin. If you want to attach it to a phase, then you will give the execution and give the phase name and a goal attached to it, so that whenever you invoke this phase or Maven is calling this phase, automatically it will try to call this goal, and with respect to that it is going to invoke this plugin. And in that, under the configuration, whatever the task you have specified, it is going to call it. Where if you do not want to attach a phase to the plugin and you want to directly call the plugin, then you can remove it, as well as you can go to the home page of that plugin and try to get the default goal associated, so that when you directly call the default phase name, then it is going to call the plugin associated to it and it is going to run only that plugin and nothing else. All right.